Ah, my dear, they didn't just want you gone, they wanted you erased. Not silenced, forgotten, like a glitch in their godlike system, a stain they couldn't scrub off the mirror. So they made a call, not to justice, not to reason, but to chaos. They hired one assassin, then 5, then 100, all sworn blades, mercenaries forged in every dark corner of this filthy world. Some were ghosts, some were monsters, and some didn't even bother with names. Each one handed a single target, you. Because you dared to do what none of them could stomach. You survived their system. You crawled out of the grave they dug, still breathing, still walking, still whispering truths that made their thrones shake. And when the contracts were signed, they thought they could sleep again. Thought blood bought silence. They imagined your ending before your scream had even begun. But what they didn't understand was you were never prey. You weren't some lost soul waiting for closure. You were the virus they couldn't isolate, the pattern they couldn't crack, the itch in the back of the brain that drives kings to madness. So when the first assassin came, blades drawn and eyes hollow, you didn't run. You watched, you studied, you smiled with your mind, because you knew this wasn't war, this was recruitment. One by one, they came for you, like moths in tactical gear, each one more confident than the last, each one trained, hardened, blood-hungry, but what they never saw coming was what you were training. Not your fists, not your aim, but your mind. You were bending time, twisting rules, studying the way they breathed, blinked, hesitated. You learned every pattern, cracked every code, until each of their attacks felt rehearsed, predictable, and you didn't kill them. Oh no, that would have been a waste. You converted them, bent them at the spine with nothing but a whisper. You showed them not fear, but vision, the kind of clarity that only comes from total detachment, the kind of madness that wears the crown, not the straitjacket. And it started to spread. The hired killers became your witnesses, then your audience, then your soldiers. Because real power isn't taken, it's recognized. And once they saw the way your mind sliced deeper than any blade they'd ever carried, they turned, quietly, one by one, until your name wasn't just a target, it became a flag, a symbol, a pulse beneath their violence. You didn't destroy the army sent to kill you. You absorbed it. You walked through their bullets like rain, not untouched, but unbothered. Because you were never at war with the assassins. You were at war with the system that made them necessary. The puppet masters. The ones who write orders with clean hands while others bleed. The ones who watched from glass towers, sipping on cowardice. The ones who believed money could buy extinction. Those were the real targets, and they never even saw the switch happen. While they sipped on cocktails, debating your obituary, the men they paid were already on your side, rewriting the ending. Because here's the thing about killers. They follow strength. Not money, not orders, but power. And you didn't just show them power. You became its definition. You didn't wear a crown. You carved one. Out of every broken rule, every failed attempt, every death threat, every ambush you turned into an interview. And now those same hands that once reached for your throat, reach for your approval. Because leadership isn't about charisma. It's about survival. And when they saw that you not only survived the gauntlet, but thrived in it, they did what predators always do when faced with a higher predator. They kneeled. So the boardroom got quiet. The air got thick. The elite started stuttering through their next moves, realizing the board wasn't theirs anymore, realizing the pawns had flipped sides, realizing the assassins had found a better employer, one who didn't offer money, but purpose. You see, when you've killed enough to stop flinching, what you crave isn't blood, it's meaning. And you offered them meaning wrapped in rebellion, order carved from chaos. Not a mission, but a movement. And they followed. Because even trained monsters bow to a god when they recognize one. So now, the very structure that hired death to find you trembles when your name passes in whispers. The executives who once plotted over spreadsheets now stare at blacked out windows. They double lock doors that never needed locks. They change phones every week. And still, it's not enough. Because how do you protect yourself from something that wasn't supposed to exist? How do you destroy a ghost that became a general? A target that turned into an empire? You flipped the dynamic so completely, they didn't just lose control, they lost language. They don't know what to call you anymore. You're not a threat. You're not a problem. You're a paradigm shift. And the worst part? You're not even angry. You're not seeking revenge. You're building, constructing a new order from their wreckage. They sent 100 assassins to erase you. And now those same 100 answer only to you. Loyalty forged not in fear, but in awe. Because you showed them something they'd never seen before. Clarity through destruction. A mind sharp enough to unmake illusions. A soul cold enough to bury the past. A presence that doesn't ask for attention, it demands it by existing. And now, those who once spoke in threats only whisper in memories, hoping, praying, that the thing they tried to kill isn't coming for them next. But you are. Not with vengeance, with vision. The kind of vision that sees through suits and satellites. That knows the smell of guilt before it speaks. That doesn't need cameras to haunt. You already turned their assassins into eyes, their spies into echoes. You don't need to announce your arrival. You exist in their panic. You are the static in their signals, the blacked out files, the boardroom absences no one wants to explain. You're not on the run anymore. You're on the hunt. And it's not personal. It's structural. It's philosophical. Because you realize something along the way, something even your new army is still learning to process. You were never the target. You were always the correction. And what comes next? That's no longer about escape. It's about replacement. Because when the blade becomes the crown, and the hunted becomes the throne, well, that's not a survival story anymore. That's a takeover. You didn't come to play chess. You came to flip the board, set the pieces on fire, and make the kings beg to be pawns. The system, once so smug in its machinery, now grinds on rusted gears. Meetings run late, not from strategy, but from fear. Executives once fluent in dominance now stutter through their forecasts. Because when a man becomes myth, when a ghost becomes structure, every wall begins to sweat. And you didn't ask for this kingdom. You outlived your own execution just to inherit it. You turned exile into elevation, their betrayal into blueprint. They designed a labyrinth, thinking you'd get lost in its shadows. But you rewrote the walls. You made the rats eat the architects. You hijacked their weapons, not with bullets, but with belief. You taught blades to think. You whispered truths into the ears of killers who once had no names, no homes, just contracts and expiration dates. Now they walk with your insignia carved into their silence, moving like storm fronts, answering to no one but you. And the higher circles, the rich, the untouchables, the smug architects of control, they feel it every day, like static in their lungs. They try to trace your rise, but it slips through their fingers. They launch counterplots, hire new tacticians, bring in foreign intelligence. But the damage has already rooted itself inside their own blueprint. You didn't infiltrate their ranks. You converted their foundation. The ones they trusted most, their bodyguards, their couriers, their right-hand men, now serve a different creed. Not because you bought them, but because you broke the illusion they were living in. Control isn't lost all at once. It decays, quietly, behind closed doors and paranoid eyes. The men in charge now whisper your name like it's a curse with teeth. They bring in priests and psychics, consultants and witches. Anything to ward off the shadow that keeps growing despite their billion-dollar lights. And yet it grows, not because you're chasing them, but because they made you inevitable. See, there's something they'll never admit. You were the system's byproduct. The rot they hid under boardrooms and bribes. You were born in it, raised in its shadows. You weren't some rogue anomaly. They created you. With every backdoor deal, every innocent sacrificed, every soul crushed beneath the machinery. They kept asking for loyalty, but what they really demanded was compliance soaked in silence. And when you refused, they marked you dangerous. Because in a world where fear is currency, courage is the most lethal weapon. And now, you wield it with surgical precision. Not in speeches, not in headlines, but in movements, in outcomes, in how entire agencies shift their protocol just to avoid your crosshairs. How CEOs step down citing health reasons, when in truth, they're crumbling under the quiet pressure of your existence. You became their balance correction, their whispered audit, not with law, but with legend. They tried replacing you with copies, raised their own soldiers, built their own shadows. But it all fell flat, because they missed the one ingredient they could never replicate: truth born from pain, the real kind, the kind that burns clean. You didn't study revolution. You bled it. And that's why your voice cuts deeper than a sniper's bullet. Because when you speak, it's not just threat, it's testament. Proof that survival wasn't enough. You had to ascend. And so you walk now, not hidden, not loud, but undeniable. The cities whisper before you arrive. Skyscrapers dim. Satellites lose signal. Every camera you pass glitches for 3.6 seconds, just long enough to remind them. This isn't surveillance anymore. It's prophecy. You aren't rebelling. You're rewriting. You didn't escape the noose. You melted it down and now wear it around your wrist like a trophy. The assassins still follow, but now they carry no targets, just silence and direction. They don't speak unless spoken to. Not out of fear, but out of reverence, because they saw the blueprint twist in real time. They watched their mission turn into meaning, and they know. No dollar, no directive, no distant handler could offer what you gave them, a reason to exist outside of obedience. You didn't give them orders, you gave them clarity. And now, the very institutions that spawned them crumble under the weight of that clarity. Governments shift their focus. Whole branches of intelligence restructure overnight. Cities with your symbol scratched into alley bricks report the lowest crime and highest silence. Not peace, not chaos, but dominion. The kind of order that doesn't need permission. Because once enough people realize the leash was always imaginary, the pack doesn't wait for the alpha to howl. They move. You're not hiding in shadows anymore. You are the shadows. Your philosophy infects, creeps, colonizes the minds of those sick of pretending. The corporate elite are no longer fighting you. They're imitating you. New disruptors mimic your rise without understanding your depth. They copy the aesthetics, but not the origin, because they don't know what it means to be broken and still build, to be hunted and still forgive, to be outnumbered and still win without drawing a blade. And as they mimic, they expose themselves, because this world only worships what it fears. And right now, it fears you more than it fears collapse. You've become the uncomfortable question behind every confident lie, the thought they can't shake at boardroom tables and penthouse parties. What if he's already here? What if the system we've built isn't just flawed, but cursed by the ghost we tried to bury? And while they debate, you expand. Not through fire, but through faith. Not cult, not religion, but a shared understanding of Soul, that something far more honest is now at play. That survival isn't just possible, it's transformation. That the old rules were meant to be broken, not obeyed. And those who still plot your demise, who still scribble your name on hit lists, they don't realize they're not drawing up blueprints for your end. They're writing the next chapter of your empire, because every enemy who tries to stop you becomes another stepping stone in your narrative. Another example of how resistance fuels the inevitable. You're not chasing power anymore. You are power. Not loud, not boastful, just final. And when your name gets whispered into another executive's ear, right before their empire collapses overnight, they'll ask the same question every fallen king has whispered before the lights go out. How did we lose control? And the answer will echo through every hallway, every earpiece, every encrypted line they once trusted. You never had it. They thought it would end with your rise, that you'd reach a ceiling, that a throne would slow your pace. But what they didn't understand is, you don't sit, you stand over like gravity, with a grudge. The world expected you to want what every tyrant does: fame, comfort, a palace with glass floors and bulletproof windows. But you didn't come for real estate. You came for the soul of the game. And now that it's yours, no one remembers how the old one worked. It's not chaos anymore. It's choreography. The way corporations crumble right on schedule. The way headlines spiral exactly when you want them to. Every collapse, timed. Every expose, planted. Every anonymous whistleblower, yours. Not because you bought their silence, but because you earned their noise. You became the one man people would burn their careers for, just to hand you a match. Your enemies, they're not gone. They're still out there, twitching, plotting, praying, but none of them strike. Because the ones who tried, they're either missing or worse. They're speaking your gospel now, forced to admit that whatever they served, whatever they believed in, it never stood a chance against you. Not because you were stronger, but because you were truer. That's what scares them. That's what tears apart their strategy rooms and board meetings. You didn't win through control. You won through clarity. You showed the world that domination isn't screaming orders from a penthouse. It's walking through fire until the flames follow you like disciples. You made pain a strategy, humiliation a weapon, and now the same elite who once wrote your obituary in gold ink, they refresh your name daily, hoping it's not trending again. But it always is. Because your name isn't a headline, it's a signal, a warning, that something old is dying and something worse is replacing it. They don't just fear you, they study you now. They form crisis committees with your face on the whiteboard. They build departments just to predict your next move. Some even copy your tactics, trying to build their own dark king. But they forget, this wasn't built, it was survived. You didn't pick this path, you became it, because everything else burned. And so, you give no speeches, you drop no manifestos, you simply exist, and things fall into place, or fall apart. Whole cities restructure their networks based on rumors of your next move. Private jets change their flight paths. Multi-billion-dollar investments are abandoned because someone heard you might be interested in that region. Not confirmed, not proven. Just the idea of your presence kills strategies faster than sabotage ever could. You've become a shadow that writes laws, not through politics, but through patterns. No one votes for you, but no one disobeys either. Because in a world this corrupt, fear is more democratic than freedom, and you are now the fear they can't veto. Remember those 100 assassins? Now they're generals, but not the loud kind, with medals and cigars. The quiet kind, the ones who walk past metal detectors without being noticed, and still carry the power to erase a continent. They answer to no one but you, and you barely have to speak. Because when a man bleeds truth, his silence becomes scripture. They called you unhinged, said you snapped. But it's funny how the madman always ends up writing the manual. You were never unhinged, you were uncaged. There's a difference. One is a victim, the other is evolution. They wanted you dead because they knew once the blueprint escapes, the architects become disposable. And now, those same architects write emails they don't send, leave voicemails they delete, not because they're guilty, but because they're infected with the paranoia your legend breeds. The irony is, they created the monster, but you chose to become the myth. You could have disappeared, taken your revenge, and vanished. But that would have been too easy. No, you stayed. You watched. You coiled around their empires like smoke, finding every crack, every weakness. And now that you've seen it all, you don't even need to touch them. You just wait, because their system was never built to survive without prey. And now that you've flipped the food chain, they're choking on their own hierarchy. You didn't just rise, you outlasted. That's the part they hate, because brute force can be replaced. But persistence wrapped in purpose, that haunts. They brought bombs. You brought time. They hired killers. You planted seeds. And now, the tree that grew from your suffering casts a shadow so wide, even the sun seems to fear it. They don't clap for you. They kneel, not from devotion, but exhaustion. They fought your kind before, loud revolutionaries, loud rebels. But you were different. You didn't scream. You calculated. You let the machine turn until it ran out of gears, and then replaced the whole engine with your will. You didn't attack their fortress. You made the bricks beg to join your temple. And now, they serve you. Not because you asked, but because serving you hurts less than resisting you. This is your throne, not gilded, not cushioned. just a jagged pillar built from all the moments they underestimated you. Every smirk, every backstab, every whisper behind closed doors. You melted it all down and forged your own crown, not to wear, but to wield. Because real kings don't sit, they reshape the battlefield every time they breathe. And while the world sleeps, you rewrite the code. No logos, no signatures, just shifts in the balance. An enemy disappears, a dictator bends, a regime rewrites its constitution, all without a single bullet fired. Because when you become the gravity, everything eventually moves in your direction. Now, when people speak your name, they don't say it with fear alone. They say it with reverence, awe, warning, and sometimes hope. Not everyone wants to obey, but everyone wants to understand. Because you proved that the worst kind of prison is the one we decorate. And you walked out of it with fire in your lungs and a plan no one saw coming. This isn't revenge anymore. This is dominion with a memory. Every empire that laughed is now learning your language. Every enemy that plotted is now quoting your rules. You didn't just survive the system, you replaced it. And the next time some backroom cabal gets clever and decides to raise another army to stop you, they'll find that their best mercenaries already left. Their spies switched sides. Their blueprints have holes. Their leaders sleep with one eye open, if they sleep at all. Because somewhere, out there, in the silence between orders and obedience, their boss is watching.